So till now, we saw that we have used enterprise structure configurator and we have created stuff like business unit, legal entity, and a reference set. And I was also saying that there is another way to achieve all those things. The another way is that we will go to each and every task and we will try to create the objects. And this time, what we will create will get saved into database directly because we are not using enterprise structure configurator and we are not dependent on loading it. This time we are directly going to the task and we are creating them. So make sure you guys create every object by using your own naming initials like SN for Sandeep or maybe like I will use TR for me. So every guys can use their own naming convention because the legal entity which you will create, the division which you will create, the business unit which you will create, the entire 5 days of session you will do the practice on those set of data only. So for this enterprise we have seen a manual approach. In case if you don't want to use ESC, you can go to the manage enterprise HCM information task and from there you can edit the enterprise details and you can enter all the details like your enterprise name, locations and do all those things. Now after enterprise, we'll discuss on the legal entity and as we have discussed yesterday also on the legal entities. So in legal entity there was a topic which we discussed was legislative data group. So we discussed that whenever we want to do a partition based on a country, so we create a legislative data group for each of the country. So whenever you are working on a payroll or a benefit or a fast formula, so many of the modules are dependent on a country specific. A fast formula in benefit can work differently for some country and can work differently for some other country. So we create a LDG for each and every country in which we are doing an implementation. So in order to create an LDG, the task which we need to go is manage legislative data group. This is the task, manage legislative data group. So we will go to our implementation project and we will go to this task, manage legislative data group, and we will enter detail. So in our exercise, each of us will create two legal legislative data group, one for US and one for India. So I'm going to the setup and maintenance. Now we are going to create each and every object manually. Manage implementation project. So this is my project. I will open it. I will search for a task. Manage legislative data. Okay. So I'm also pinging you in the chat so that you guys can also use the same task. Now you can select any one. Click the second one. Between second and third, the first one is a different task. Click go to task. Now you can see that different LDGs are there. So suppose that if you want to edit some information, if you want to do some changes, so you can search the LDG and you can do the changes. If you want to create something from scratch, so you need to click on create. So I will use a naming convention TR LDG 001. So I'm creating one for US. So you can see this currency gets auto populated. This cost allocation structure is something which finance guys use. So it is like your for budgeting purpose. It is like how you actually allocate the cost for your company. So we will leave this. So meanwhile, I will also maintain a for what data I'm creating. So I have created a LDG with this name. Another LDG will be like Italian in US so that I can remember. The first one is US and second one will be IN. As soon as I select India, you can see the currency gets auto-populated. Click submit. So now I should have two LDG, and these are the two LDG which I will use throughout my session. And this is how you manually create a legislative data group. So whenever you have a client and that client actually works in 3 or 4 different countries. So once you are done with the creation, just try to search where you are able to see your LDGs.
So these legislative groups, data groups we created for mainly for payroll, benefits, for everything.
NFS, yeah. So whenever you have a requirement to do something at a country level, so you
Okay.
have to use this legislative data group. Suppose that
Oh,
you are writing a HCM extract. HCM extract is something which is a tool which we use to extract the data out of system. So
yeah.
there also we use the legislative data group. You are writing a fast formula, all the EPS guys would be knowing. So a
Mm-hmm.
fast formula can also be associated with a legislative data group. So it will only work for employees of that legislation. And
But
this legislative data group comes into a picture whenever you are working a lot in a payroll and
okay.
your benefits. And once we create a legal entity, in legal entity also, when you identify a legal entity as a payroll statutory unit, so you will associate a legislative data group that for which area it is a, for which country it is a payroll statutory. So
But
this
like the
LDG
one
comes,
we
yeah,
created legal entity names, business units, and enterprise structure, right?
yeah, but we didn't load, so it was not saved. This time we are going with a manual approach, and this time
Okay.
whatever we are creating is getting saved in database. And whatever we did by enterprise structure configurator, we will also do the same activity by going to the manual task and create them manually. And whenever you do an implementation, there is a high chance that you will opt for a manual. Because when you do a manual, system gives you a lot of flexibility to add additional set of information.
Okay.
Suppose if I take an example of enterprise, if you remember, when you enter enterprise by ESC, you enter very small detail, very pretty basic detail. But when you went to the task which is only specifically dedicated to enterprise, then there were many other options which you can enter. So as soon as
See,
you select India, this
yeah,
INR should automatically be populated.
correct, right? But I
Yeah.
don't know why it's not populating.
Because it's
Search
Adobe,
India.
you have to disable Adobe
What is it?
So I ad blocker, I think, is it
ad
due to ad
blocker.
blocker?
Oh, ad blocker, is it?
So
Oh, okay.
no. Just write
Not
India.
Oh,
ad.
I did something wrong. I moved up. Hold on. Right click.
Maybe you can do that pause on the site.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even
Okay,
other
and there's
one.
another one also.
Now, what I have to change here?
Go to option. Just click, I think you have click right click. Click the left click on there. Click normal click, yeah. And just there's a button. Just move it to the left. Block, yeah. Drag it to the left. There's a button, start button. Start or stop button there.
This one.
In the blue color. Yeah,
I
drag it to
got
the
you.
left.
But for US it picked up. I'm wondering like why it did pick up
Click
for us.
tab. Once you enter India, just hit tab.
I enter India.
Click,
Hit.
and
Okay.
click tab. In the
I did
India
that.
column, highlight India. Click tab. Tab button.
Yeah.
So now we are done with the enterprise, we are done with legal entity, legal legislative data group. So our next task is to create a legal entity. And as we have discussed that the legal entity is something which is registered with the government so that your company can actually do a trade, can actually pay for your employees and can do all the payroll and income tax related activities. Whenever you create a legal entity, the legal entity can be either a legal employer or legal entity can be either a payroll statutory unit. Legal employee is something which is responsible for hiring an employee. So whenever you have a legal entity which is a legal employer, so that will be used to hire an employee. And whenever you have a legal entity which is a payroll statutory unit, that means that legal entity is registered with the country so that the legal entity can do operations or can do trades, can do businesses in that country and will be liable to the income tax laws. Now, what happens? You can create a legal entity which will be a legal employer, but it is not a PSU. So in that case, what we'll do is that you will actually identify other legal entity which is already a PSU and you will select there. We'll see how to do that. So maybe there can be a legal entity which is a PSU as well as a legal employer, but you can have other legal entities which are not PSU. You are just using it for your hiring purpose. It is not related for any taxation or any payroll related stuff. So same thing, we have a legal entity. So these are the points which we need to consider. If a legal entity has to be a legal employer, it means you are trying to hire an employee in that, then in that case you have to make a legal entity a legal employer also. If you want it to use for payroll and all the income tax related purpose, then you want to make it, then you have to make it as a PSU. A legal entity can be both PSU and legal employer. And they can also be a multiple legal employers, and they can have one other legal entity which is a PSU, and all of them can be attached to the parent legal entity. Directly go to the task. In order to work with legal entity, the first we will have a multiple task. So the first task is manage legal entity. Use the enterprise structure configurator and you load that into the system, then the legal entity will be created, what you have given in the enterprise structure configurator. If not, if you are doing all the things manually, then you have to use this task, manage legal entity, and you have to create the legal entity manually in the system. So I'm also putting this into chat. So this is a task, manage legal entity. You need to click on this manage legal entity task. And you remember we had a question in the first day that what is the scope, and I mentioned that in order to perform certain tasks, you have to actually identify a scope or the object on which you are trying to work. So suppose that if you are trying to edit a existing legal entity which is already there in system, so in scope you will select the existing legal entity, select and add. And if you are trying to create something, then in that case you will select create new. So once you select a scope create new, then the system will land you to a page where you can create a new legal entity. Select create new in this scope option. So before clicking this go to task, you have to select the scope. So our scope is to create a new. So we'll select create new. We'll click on apply and go to task. Now we will click plus. Okay. So we'll create two legal entities, one for US and one for India. And both of our legal entity will be legal employer as well as payroll statutory. So we'll use the same naming convention.
But
US.
we created same data group set, right? Data group for the one for US and one for India.
Yeah, we created data group and we are now creating legal entity. Both are different objects. Data group is something at a country level. So you are actually doing a partition on a country level. Legal entity is something which we are creating so that we can hire an employee and we can actually do a payroll related stuff like income tax calculation, all those things. So both are different objects. So if you see, my LDG name was with something like TR underscore LDG US and this one is TRLA. So for each of the legal entity, you have to give some unique identifier. 001. Make sure always start date either it is 1901 or 1951. Now, for me it is both PSU as well as legal employer. In case you are creating a legal entity and it has to be only legal employer, it doesn't do anything related to your taxation or payroll purpose, then in that case you have to select some other legal entity from this drop down, which will be the parent PSU. So all your other legal entities which are PSU will start appearing there. You're identifying jurisdictions. So as you are creating a company or a legal entity in US, so your jurisdiction will be your United States income tax. So under United States income tax, whenever you open a company, so you will get a EIN or TIN, and you will get some number like a legal reporting number. So for time being, we can enter anything. Okay. Now, for each legal entity, you need to have a legal address, because whenever you register a company and whenever you go to a government that you are trying to register a company, there has to be a registered address. So that is your legal address. So you will click on this. All the legal addresses which are created under US in the system will start appearing. In case you want to create a new one, you can actually go and create it by using a task manage legal address. So I will show you. Meanwhile, I will use any one of them. So now I have entered country, I have entered name, I have entered a unique identifier, I have entered the start date. End date is not required, so I am leaving it. Our legal entity is both an employer as well as a company which is registered by a certain law, so that it can be used for your payroll and income tax purpose. And we have entered a unique number, that is EIN, TIN, and we have entered the registration number, and we have entered a legal address. I have selected a legal address which was already created. I can also, after this I will show you how to create a legal address. So in case you want to create a legal address of your own, so before creating a legal entity, you have to create a legal address.
So can we edit
So
after once you save these changes?
yeah.
Usually we
Yeah, we
shouldn't
can.
touch this information right once you set up.
Yeah, usually. But in case if you want to inactivate, suppose that a company was operating in a XYZ country or US.
Okay.
Now they have stopped operation. So you have to inactivate this legal entity. So to inactivate this legal entity, what you will do is that you will enter a end date and you will uncheck this payroll statutory unit flag. So
Okay.
it will start showing as an inactive system. So I'm clicking save and close.
The change address, you can just go and query it and just say the, change the address, right? So that doesn't have.
If you want to change the name or something, I will show you how to change the data. So
but my point was, let us say the address changed, the legal address changed.
Change that. Right? That is not a harm.
Is it date tracked?
Yeah, it is date tracked. So in the legal entity table, you will see that there will be two records for that legal entity. Now, suppose that the legal entity which we have created, we want to edit some information there. So this time, we have to select a scope and we have to select the legal entity which we have created. So we will click on select and this time we will select and add. Previously we selected create new, this time we will use select and add. And in this search option, I will use my legal entity which I have created. So this was a legal entity which we created right now. So we will highlight this and we will click save and close. So suppose that if I want to change in something information, if I want to remove this PSU, if I want to remove this address, so you can do all those things, and after doing you can click save and close again. Okay, so see, by default it is, once you have selected a scope, it is actually remembering the old one. Now as I have created a legal entity for US, I will go and create a legal entity for India. This time I will change the country to India. So as soon as you will notice that if I change to India, this EIN and TIN and everything will get replaced. Instead of EIN or TIN, we will have a PAN number. Because whenever you register a company in India, you have a PAN number like other information, say employer number or tax reference number. So totally, okay, I think it is some other jurisdiction. There's some problem in this instance. Ideally, it should come as a India income tax, something like that. Okay, somebody has changed the jurisdiction, so that is not a problem. You guys to see that depending upon the country, these informations will change. I will enter something unique data there. 1901. Again, this legal entity will be a PSU and a legal employer. Be like any unique number. Legal address. Let's see. I can select anyone which is created. Okay, so I have all the details now. I will click save and close. So I have created two legal entity. One is for US and one is for India. So any questions how to create a legal entity or how to edit a legal entity which is already there in the system? Once you create these legal entity, we'll go to another task, how to create legal address. Right now we have selected the legal address which was already there. But now suppose that we have a blank instance. So in that case, you have to create legal address first, then move to the task legal entity. So right now just try to complete the legal entity task and then we'll go to the legal address. Once you are complete, just update me in the chat. The task I have actually pinged the task name which you have to enter and you have to select the scope accordingly.
So Praveen, I created like two legal entities, one for US and one for India. So once we came back to the task list and task page, so we should be able to see that the scope, right? Or we have to select the scope every time?
Select the scope. So maybe it actually remembers the last selected. So as you have created, you didn't actually selected the search option. If you select a search option and you come back, it will keep on remembering the last time, whatever you have searched, the last one.
So I created two legal entities. So I'm like,
yeah. So you have to select, click select in legal entity, manage legal entity. You can use any option. So yeah, click select and add, click apply, go to task. Yeah. So there is search, expand is search.
So we should select both or only one?
One at a time.
Okay. So it means we are doing all the operations particular to that location.
Yeah, but to that legal entity.
Okay. So then it will remember the selection now.
Yeah. Now you come saving close to see it remembers the old one. Now again, if you have to search for another one, you have to change the scope.
Okay. So any setups or any configurations, what I'm doing is right now, everything will be under US legal entity.
Yeah. And it will be under SM underscore legal underscore entity.
Yeah.
And now as you have this scope selected, you can directly click on go to task. So it will land you to that place.
Okay. What is current status? Okay. Current status means like current status, or there are like two?
It is like, it is the current one. The legal address is the current one. You can have more than one address and you can set it to be, which one is the current one.
Okay.
Sir, I'm having an issue. Can you share? Can I share my screen?
Sandeep, can you pass on the rights to Anirudh?
I created two legal entities, but that scope is not showing up. The name of that entity.
Yeah. In legal entity, go to this legal entity. Click there. Click select. In this legal entity drop down, click select and add. Click apply and go to task. Expand this search. There is the icon. Yeah, arrow. Expand the search arrow and expand the search result also. Okay, now enter the legal entity which you have created. It is not the legal entity. Use percentage. AS_LE, use percentage after that. So this was the name which you have created.
Okay.
Okay. Click
But
save and close.
in your implementation, the scope part was showing the name of the AS_LE.
It will show. Click save and close. Highlight that and click save and close. Click save and close now. If you want to do any changes, you can do, and you can click save and close. Now see,
Okay.
for you also it is showing. Maybe you might have missed the previous process. And now if you want to work on some other location, other entity, then again you have to change the scope.
Then I'll again go for
Select and add. Select and add. Yeah. Apply and go to task. And then again you will search for the other legal entity and you will highlight that and you will click save and close. Okay, so you can pass on the presentation rights to me. I think Sandeep has completed and Ruth has also completed. Guys, update me once you are done so that we'll move to the other task. Okay, so Sridhar is also completed. Let me see. I think I'm waiting for Lakshmi to reply. Santosh, are you done? Click save and close once you have entered all the data. Now everyone has completed the legal entity. So you remember whenever we are entering the legal address in the legal entity tab, the system will be actually displaying us the legal address which are already there in the system. Now suppose that if we have a requirement to create a legal address of our own, or if you have a vanilla instance, then in that case you need to create all the legal address. So once we have entered all the details, we can click OK. So you can see the detail which you have created is coming there. And once it is coming, you have to click save and close. So now once you have created your legal address, whenever you create a legal entity, it will appear in that legal address box. So if you have selected a US as a country to create a legal entity, all the legal address created in a US area will start appearing. Somebody has changed the personalization view also. Let me select for United States so we can see what are the address which we created is there or not. We created on a, okay, so this was the address which we created. If you want to edit it, you can go and edit it depending upon your requirement later on. So before creating a legal entity, you have to create the legal addresses first so that it appears in the drop down when you create a legal entity. Our legal address task is complete. I can leave this task so that you guys can try later on also. and legal entity task is complete. Now, while creating a legal entity, we actually entered a small amount of information like your registration number, like the country, like whether it is a legal employer, whether it is a PSU. But there are many other informations which we can capture at a legal entity. We can also capture informations like working hour. We can also capture informations like employment model. So if you capture information at an employment model, so what you have at a legal entity will override what you have at an enterprise. What are the informations which we can uh, capture at a legal entity? So for that, we will go back to our task.
Can you repeat?
Manage legal. While creating a legal entity, we saw that we entered some information like your registration number, EIN or TIN, or any other unique number which was country dependent. Then we entered the name. Then we actually identified whether it is a PSC or whether it is a legal employer. Other than that, we can also store many other informations at a legal entity level. We can actually store the working hours. We can store the employment model. So if you store these informations at a legal entity level, then it will actually override the value which you have stored at an employment level. So suppose that if an if an enterprise level, the standard working hours is 40 hours a week. But we have an exception. We want this legal entity to work 48 hours a week. So what we can do is that we can override those settings of enterprise at a legal entity level also. So for this, we need to go to this task, manage legal entity HCM information. So first time, you will go to the task, manage legal entities. If you want to create or if you want to edit any information which is related to like name or start date, in date, whether it is a PSC or whether it is a if you want to edit a legal address, so you will go to this task, manage legal entity. The second task is manage legal entity HCM information. Is a task where we will go once our legal entity is created. It will by default remember the scope which we have selected. So when you select a scope for any one of the tasks, all other tasks also remember the same scope. So we will go to our both legal entity. First we'll go to our US one and then we'll go to our India legal entity. So as US is already selected, I will directly click on this. I will directly click on go to task. So these are the informations which we entered, effective date, and as if we didn't enter in date, so it is active. And this legal entity, our US legal entity, is a legal employer as well as payroll statutory unit. So we have two tabs appearing. If it is a legal employer, then only a legal employer tab will come. Now, let's click on edit. Yeah.
While creating this legal entity, I put an effective start date as 1956. It shouldn't be any problem, right?
No, 1956. It will come. So we'll click on correct. Edit correct. Now, if you remember, I mentioned that there are certain settings which you do at an enterprise level and certain settings which you can do also at a legal employer level. And when you do at a legal employer level, it will override what you have at a enterprise. So if you remember in our manage enterprises and information task, we had this start time, end time. Now for this legal entity, we want that we should work 48 hours weekly. So this will override what we have at an enterprise level. So all the employees in this legal entity, when they will be hired, will show that their standard working hour is 48 hours per week. Then you can also add other information, like suppose that you have selected 2-tier multiple assignment at an enterprise, but you are pretty much sure that this legal entity, all the employee will have a single assignment, then you can override that also. We normally don't do any things like that at a legal entity. It is hardly we do, but I just wanted you guys to understand what we can do. Then you can have this minimum age, maximum age. So whenever you give a minimum age and a maximum age, and whenever you try to hire a person, so the system will do a calculation that okay, if you try to hire a person and the age of a person is like 16 or 17 years, and the minimum age you have given is 20 years, then the system will throw an error that the person which you are trying to hire is not up to the age. So all these settings we can do at this place. Then again, minimum working age you can, sorry, it is a retirement age. Minimum working age is something what you can identify here. Then again, if you're using 2-tier, then the salary level will be assignment. If you are using 3-tier, then the salary level will be terms. So all these things you can do in this place. If you want to override the things which you have at an enterprise level. If you don't want, then leave it blank. Now, this is a legal employee detail, this page. If you come to federal, so all the federal related data, so as this legal entity is in US, so all the information regarding your EO, all the information regarding your vet report, so you can actually fill those data also, if client wants. So you can fill all your vet reporting rule, you can fill all your EO reporting rules and all those things. So you guys can have a feel that what are the data which is there. Again, we don't do these things normally. Position synchronization is something which I will come back. So it was on an enterprise, it is also on a legal employer. So we'll come back and we will discuss when we are done with our position chapter. Now if you come to payroll statutory unit, as we have created this legal employer or legal entity in US country. So you will select a legislative data group to this legal entity. So it will be a US legislative data group. So if I remember, I have created this legislative data group. So now this time you guys will go open a task, manage legal entity HCM information, see all the fields, what are there, and in the payroll statutory unit, you will attach the corresponding LDG. So if you are actually seeing your US legal entity, then you will attach the legislative data group which you have created for US. Click submit. Now click done. So I
What
have
about the start here? Sorry, Praveen, fiscal start here?
Yeah, physical start year. Suppose that for organization, if the physical start year can be January, for some organization the physical start year is April. So when they start their business. So this PSU data, whatever you entered in the payroll statutory unit, will be used in payroll module. So whatever the physical data or the physical date you will enter, it will be used in a payroll module. I have done it for US. Now let me change the scope and do it for India. So I will change the scope, select an ad, and I will search my other legal entity so that I can attach a legislative data group. Same, I will click edit, I will click correct. If any information needs to be changed, I will do the change. If client wants to override something at a legal employee level, I will do that. I will come to the PSU section and I will update the legislative data group which I have created for India location.
But when you select this India, right, the payroll statutory unit, we don't see list of states or cities the way it came for US. On the left hand
In
side.
US also it did. In legal employer section, for US it was a federal, because it is in US whenever you create a legal entity, there are a lot of specific information which you need to capture for a US legislation. That is the reason that came. For India, if you
Okay.
see, it is a legal employee detail. In India, the information which you capture changes. We don't have any BETS reporting in India. We don't have any EEU reporting in India. So that is the reason it is not coming. In India, we have these informations which we generally capture at a legal entity level. That is, what is your registration number, what is the legal employer notice period detail, so all those things.
Okay.
It totally depends upon the legislation. So maybe if you try to create a legal entity in a Canada, so you may see that a lot of other information can come, which is very much responsible or required for a company to get registered in Canada. So again, for in this payroll statutory unit, I will select my India LDG, which I have created. Again, if required, you can enter your fiscal start date, but we can leave it blank. You guys have to go to the task manage legal entity enterprise, this one, in HCM information. So I have already pinned you guys in the chat, and after that you have to select the scope accordingly. And for the legal entity for US which you have created, assign the legislative data group of US. For India, assign the India legislative data group. And try to navigate to the different tabs like legal employer, payroll statutory unit, and see what are the details which you guys are seeing there.
So in this task, what you've done is you're assigning those legislative data group and legal entity for a specific country.
Yeah, we are actually combining them. We are actually creating a relationship between them. So your legal legislative data group was right now alone, and legal entity which you created was alone. Now it is like we have joined them together.